Hello, AGC. I'm just kidding. That would almost be too on brand. I'm gonna wear my hat. All right, let's get started. So the title of this talk is Whatever You Do, Don't Bore Them. And really that is at the heart of what I'm going to communicate today. I don't know about you, but I hate presentations that are longer than they need to be, so we're gonna clock in at about 30 to 45 minutes. Now, what are you gonna walk away with in these next 30 to 45 minutes? You're gonna walk away with a system in which you can use in every facet of your business to get clients to notice, feel, and remember you. Not only clients, but also talent, because that's obviously a huge issue right now within the construction trades. This formula is the exact same formula that businesses across industries, across sectors use to get people to notice and remember them. So today we're gonna look at what they're doing, how they're doing it, and how you can apply this into your own business. So let's get going. To illustrate how powerful this concept can be, I want to highlight the story of Cornerstone General Contractors and how they won the Lake Stevens High School build. Now, this was a GCCM project, and there were three, including Cornerstone, three firms that were being interviewed. Now, all three were pretty qualified. Cornerstone was the underdog, so they had been in business for 15 or 16 years at this point, and they knew that they were the underdog going into this interview. And so they thought to themselves, how are we going to stand out? How are we going to make a lasting impression? And so what they ended up doing is they ended up getting these, plastic Viking hats, and they wore them. All 10 of the people that were in the interview wore them into the interview with the Lake Stevens High School committee. Now, Lake Stevens High School, they're the Vikings, so obviously that's why they did that. So they walk into the interview, the Lake Stevens committee, they laugh, they think it's funny. They get down to the actual interview, life goes on. Now, what ends up happening is Cornerstone wins this project. That is the power of surprise and delight. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, Taylor, how do we actually know that that's what did it? How do we know that that's the Viking hats, that's what had an influence on the ultimate decision of the committee? Now, this is why I love this story so much. So Steve Horsley, who's one of their superintendents, he ends up going on a fishing trip in Montana with one of the people that was on that committee. And he said, I just for my own curiosity, I just have to know, did the hats have anything to do with your decision to choose us? And the guy turns to him and he says, Steve, that is what was the deciding factor. Because here's the thing, all three of the companies that we're interviewing, all of you were equally qualified. All of you, we knew you could do the work. All of you came in at a pretty similar price point, but those Viking hats, it showed us what kind of firm you are. It showed us what kind of relationship we'll have. It showed us that this process is not going to be just nuts and bolts. It's going to be fun. We're going to enjoy it. So how do we apply this idea of surprise and delight? How do we spend $7 on plastic Viking hats that end up winning us $87 million projects? To me, that is such a great example of leverage. How do we do just a tiny bit of input for an outsized output? Who the heck is Taylor, and why should you listen to me? It's a fair question. I started Flannel Media back in 2017, and then in 2019, we really began a focus on the construction industry. One, because it was just so visual. There's just so much cool stuff to show. But also at a deeper level, it's because some of the hardest working people I know are in construction, some of the most humble people I know, and they have incredible stories to tell, but because they are so humble, they struggle to tell it. And as a result, they struggle to attract business, they struggle to attract talent. And so that's really what drew me to the construction industry, and that has been one of my focuses ever since. And so we've worked with quite a few firms, helping them communicate who they are, what they do, what they value, to attract the right kinds of clients and the right kinds of people. I don't know if you've noticed, but it seems like we live in the noisiest period in history. And I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say, doesn't feel like it, it is it. Not only does it feel like it, it also is the truth. Because we have email, we have text, we have video, we have social media. There is just so much stuff out there. And the problem is that with AI, essentially the cost to create just blah stuff is zero. The price is zero to create blah. And so we have to stand out. We have to create content that is more human, that is more authentic. And how do we do that? How do we stand out in a sea of noise? And I think we do that through humanity, through authenticity, and through surprise and delight. And that is what we're going to talk about today. Now I want to get into brain science, because understanding the brain science, understanding how the brain works, what it pays attention to, and what it doesn't, and why, is going to set the foundation for everything else that we are going to learn in a few minutes. So Here we go. So the brain cannot possibly pay attention to everything. If it did, we would be paralyzed, right? We'd be laying there in the morning, we'd wake up and we'd say, oh my gosh, what kind of sheets are these? Are these Egyptian cotton? I wonder what the thread count is on these. Egyptian cotton. Does that mean that do they mill the cotton in Egypt and then they send it to China? Right? We would be paralyzed. There would just be simply too much information. And so the brain had to figure out a way to sort what is important, what do I pay attention to, and then what do I not even let in? What do I just not even let into my brain? So the brain actually does this automatically. You don't decide, I'm going to take this in, I'm not going to take this in. The brain developed this filter and it does it automatically for you, so you are able to move throughout the world and get things done. Now here's the problem. Most marketing that is out there, most communication that is out there, because I want to be clear, marketing communication, this could be internal marketing, this could be external marketing, this could be you trying to communicate something to a site lead, this could be you trying to communicate something to an employee, this could be a training handbook, this could be an HR workshop. Anything that you are trying to communicate, it needs to be communicated in a way that people are going to pay attention and listen. So the way I think about it is anything that is created with the intent for somebody to take action, that is marketing. And like I said, the problem is that most communication, most marketing, it's boring and the brain automatically filters it out. Now I want to pause here and run a short experiment. So, you watching this, I want you to think about at your house, at your home, what is the brand of the toilet in your home? Now likely, you can't tell me. You probably can't tell me what the name of the toilet is, the name of the oven, the name of the range. And the reason for that is because it's unimportant. So the brain just doesn't even take it in. Even though it's something you probably interact with every single day, you just simply don't notice it. And all of this makes sense because it goes back to our evolutionary history. If you hear, the wind blowing through the leaves, you're not really going to pay attention to that. If you hear a twig snap, you are going to turn and pay attention to that because it's unexpected. That could be a tiger, right? So it's better to pay attention to the things that are unexpected, and we're pretty safe to ignore the things that are expected, that are normal, that are boring. So predictable, ignore it. Unexpected, pay attention to it. This explains why you can't tell me how many silver Hondas you passed on your way to work today, but you can probably tell me how many orange Lamborghinis you passed, because orange Lamborghini, unexpected, silver Hondas, expected and boring. Okay, so we've established the brain science that the brain pays attention to what is unexpected, what is delightful, what is surprising, and the brain filters out what is boring and what is predictable. And so if we look at these brands, if we look at Patagonia, and we look at some of the stuff, some of the marketing, hey, there they are. If we look at some of the marketing that they have done, it is surprising, it is delightful, it is unexpected, it goes against the grain, so we pay attention to it. So whether it be Patagonia or Liquid Death, which has built a water brand, water of all things, to a $1.4 billion empire, to the Savannah Bananas, which has, it's an exhibition baseball team that has sold out Fenway Park, or whether it is Carhartt. All of these brands are leaning into what I call the 6 flavors of surprise and delight. They have figured out their own unique way that aligns with their values and their priorities of being the orange Lamborghini within their industry. Now I want to be clear, this works across industries, it works across sectors, and the reason is because all of this taps into how our brains are wired. Okay, so why exactly does this work? Let's get a little bit more into the science, and then we'll get into application. All right, so as I mentioned, your brain has a filter, and this filter is called Broca's area of the brain. So I want you to think of it like this guy. Now, this guy is 280 pounds, he's 6'5", he eats nails for breakfast. And Broca decides what gets into the brain and what goes straight into the garbage. So it's not that we just ignore stuff that's boring, because to ignore something, you have to be consciously aware of it, right? I'm going to ignore that annoying noise. You don't consciously think, I'm going to ignore all those Hondas that are passing me. You don't even register those. And so Broca's area is what decides what gets in and what gets filtered out. Now, what gets filtered out is boring, is predictable. What gets let in is surprising and delightful things. So that is the science behind it. Let's look at how it actually works. So here are 2 ads side by side. Both of them are Black Friday ads. And I want you to think about which ad resonates with you more. Which ad gets your attention? Which ad makes you curious? Of course, it is the ad on the right. It is the Patagonia ad that says, don't buy this jacket. Because we are bombarded. on Black Friday with ads 50% off, 40% off, 60% off, blah, 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 blah. Boring, predictable. However, an ad comes along like this. Don't buy this jacket. Suddenly we're saying that is surprising, that is different, that is unpredictable. I'm going to lean in. I want to know why. I want to know what they're saying. So let's look at what Patagonia is doing. And whether they realize it or not, they are following what I call the SDS method: surprise, delight, and story. So here's the formula. Surprise plus delight plus story equals resonance. And that is what we're going for. We're not just going for attention. We want resonance. We want people to remember us in a positive way. We want our messages that we're communicating, we want those to land and to resonate. So the way I think about it is surprise gets attention, delight keeps attention, the story answers the why should I care, and resonance is an emotional connection. And the emotional connection, the emotional piece is important because we don't have time to get into it, but we make decisions emotionally and then we back up those decisions with logic later. So if this were a live workshop, which it is not, this is pre-recorded, I would pause right here and I would say, how are we doing? Are there any questions? But since I cannot, we'll just keep going. So what happens if you have story without surprise and delight? You get the wedding planner, which is boring and predictable. For those of you who have not seen it, I'm guessing you are able to predict what happens at the very end of this movie. You are correct. Yes, they do end up together. Sorry for the spoiler. And so as a result, it's boring, it's predictable, and the audience doesn't really care. Surprise without delight and story, you get the waving tube man guy in front of the car dealership, in front of the restaurant. Attention getting? Sure. Surprising? Yeah. But does it resonate? Does it make me pull into that car dealership and purchase a car? No, it does not. Delight without surprise and story, you get AI art, which is incredible. It's amazing that it exists. I can type in, create me an image of Mount Baker in the style of Vincent van Gogh, and bam, there it is. But am I hanging it on my wall? Do we know anyone that has hung AI art on their wall? No, because there's no story behind it. It doesn't resonate with us. There's something is missing, and that something is story. So let's go back to our Patagonia ad, because I think this is a great example illustrating the idea of surprise, delight, and story. So this was in November of 2011, and this was their Black Friday ad they put in the New York Times. And what is surprising, delightful, and what is the story behind this, and how does it resonate? So to me, the surprise is that it is telling me not to buy. Don't buy this jacket. That is surprising. That's a surprising ad in the midst of all these other ads that are saying 50% off, 60% off, blah, blah, blah. This makes me turn my head and say, well, what are they doing? The delightful part of this ad is it's sparse. It's not complicated. It's not busy. It's pretty plain. It's pretty minimal. And it makes me lean in. It makes me say, what are they doing? It piques my curiosity. Gives me a little smile on the corner of my mouth. Now, what is the story? The story of Patagonia is all about environmental stewardship. It is about paying people fair wages that are making their clothes. It is about offering warranties that are the best in the industry. Lifetime warranty. If it's broken, we'll fix it. If we can't fix it, we'll send you a new one. Patagonia is the real deal. And this is a absolutely critical point. This cannot be a gimmick. This company, because they stand by what they say, because they are who they are, they can run an ad like this. They are not fast fashion. They really do mean this. They really do mean don't buy this jacket. Instead, fix your old one. Instead, go without, because creating textiles, creating clothing, it does do harm on our planet. It does do harm on our environment. So again, when you're thinking about doing this for your own company, absolutely do it. But it cannot be a gimmick. It cannot be something that you're doing just to get attention, just to stand out. It has to be backed up by your actual brand values and by your actual brand beliefs. I love coffee. I love coffee. I roast coffee. I drink coffee. I like to smell the coffee beans, right? So I love coffee. And what I did is I printed out this flavor wheel where it has all these different, profiles, flavors. You have fruity and you have a berry flavor. You have nutty. You have walnut. You have, it could taste like sandpaper, right? So you have all these different flavors of coffee. And I've realized, kind of like a flavor wheel for coffee, you can create a flavor wheel for surprise and delight. And so what I've done is I've identified 6 flavors, so to speak, of surprise and delight. So let's take a look at these. The 6 flavors I've identified are curiosity, awe, humor, generosity, kindness, and tradition. And if we think about the Patagonia ad, that is curiosity. It is curiosity, like, why would I not buy a jacket, right? It's curiosity. Maybe it's awe. Maybe it's saying, like, wow, they are really, they're doing what they say they stand for. They are legitimately who they say they are, which feels rare in today's environment. Or if we think about what Cornerstone did, what flavor of surprise and delight was that? It was humor, right? It's funny. It was completely unexpected, right? I don't expect these, serious construction blokes to walk in with these Viking hats on. It's humor. It opens people up. So what I've done is I've developed this framework, and this framework really walks you through each element to create a marketing campaign, whether it be internal, external, to be able to use these elements of surprise and delight, to do it in a way that feels authentic to you, and to identify what flavor of surprise and delight do we want to use for this campaign or for this marketing objective. So let's walk through it. We first have the attentional objective. This is what is it that you want people ultimately to pay attention to. Second is the audience. Who is the audience? Who are they? What do they think? What do they feel? What do they believe? Third, they have expectations. What expectations does this audience have about this thing that is going to be communicated? Next is our brand voice. What do we stand for? What do we believe in? What do we value? And how are we going to pair that with our surprise flavor? Maybe for this campaign, it's going to be humor. Maybe for this campaign, it's going to be awe. We don't have to lean into just one. We have 6 flavors to choose from, but for every campaign, you're going to have primarily one flavor. Now, how could we defy expectations? What are some ideas of how we could defy expectations? And then story. Critically, once we have this person's attention, once we have this audience's attention, what is it that we want them to take away from it? Why should they care? Excellent. Good work, everybody. We are doing great. I just want to pause right here. Once again, I know this isn't live, but it feels like we should pause right here so you can take a second to reflect on this framework. Some common objections that I get to this is, yeah, but we're not funny. And you don't have to be funny. That's where I would say lean into your surprise and delight flavor. I think funny can definitely work, right? You look at Liquid Death, you look at Savannah Bananas, totally leaning into funny. The Patagonia ad, not funny, right? But it is surprising and delightful. And so think about how can we lean into something that feels authentic to us. I think it does have to feel authentic to you. If you try to do it and it feels forced, if it feels contrived, I just don't think it's going to work. I don't think you're going to stick to it. So think about what is it that we can stick to? What is it that feels right to us? You might think, Taylor, this is risky. And that's where I would say, absolutely it is. Absolutely it's risky, right? Cornerstone walks into this meeting, they have the Viking hats on. It's very possible they could have been not taken very seriously because they're wearing these silly Viking hats, right? Entirely possible. So yes, when you're trying to pull off when you're trying to pull off surprise and delight, there's definitely risk that is involved. But I think it is risky to not do the surprise and delight because most people like to be surprised and delighted. Most people are going to respond positively. And most people in their communication, pretty boring, pretty forgettable. So I think the true risk is to not try. Another really common objection I get when it comes to folks that are in construction is we're humble. We don't like to brag about ourselves. And that is where I would say, absolutely. And I think that's what is just so cool about the industry is like we put our heads down and we work. But at the same time, you have to be clear. You have to be clear about your work. So I would say don't be loud, be clear. And this last point ties into this previous point, but I think a lot of people feel like the work should speak for itself. And for better or worse, you have to speak for the work. And it's just an acknowledgement of reality. It's just acknowledgement of where we're at. You don't have to like it, but you do have to acknowledge it. So there is the framework. We have gone over why we pay attention to things that are surprising and delightful, and why the brain just doesn't even register the things that are boring and predictable. We have gone over the brain science of exactly how that works. We have looked at real life companies that are doing this. We have looked at companies both within the construction industry as well as companies that are outside of the construction industry. And we've seen how this works across sectors and across industries. Now, where do you go from here? What do you do from here? Do you do a huge company makeover? No. What I would suggest is try this in a very, very small way. Try this at a small scale. Maybe it is your next ad for superintendent, and you have the way that you've written ads forever, right? You've had your job listing template forever. And what if instead you were to use this template, use this framework in order to change the way that you communicate, in order to alter the way that you communicate, in order to surprise and delight, to get people to lean in? That would be my suggestion, is do one very small experiment this week and just see, evaluate the results, see how it goes. I'll also, at the very end of this presentation, include some videos that I think do an excellent job of surprise and delight and really illustrate the point I'm talking about. No point in adding those into this presentation. You can check them out on your own time, but I think they do such a fantastic job of surprising and delighting, and I'm really excited for you to see both the Jean-Claude Van Damme video and the Encounter Collection. I think the Encounter Collection is probably the greatest brand video that I have ever seen, so be sure to check that out. Lastly, here is a slide with my contact information. If you want to get in touch, if you want to talk about these concepts further, I think this is really fun stuff, and I think it really could transform your business. So please get in touch with me if you feel so inclined. That's it. Thanks again. We'll see you soon. Maybe we'll see you soon. I don't know. Either way, take care.